have to watch for Yusha to,
See if she chimes in.
well, we'll have to admit her into the room.
I'm better saying that. I feel like they're not.
I don't plan to.
I think we're on now, right?
Are we on?
Okay, I sent you all a copy because it's very long, including Mandy, so she doesn't have to take notes, but I really, after Joanne and I spent 2 hours together, I felt like I needed to make a strong statement at the beginning of this meeting that I would like to read into the record officially, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read my statement. So, you know how I think. You'll see my letters. You will see my letter. I think it outlines, and so I wrote this in a list so that I can be very clear. It's not concise, but it's as concise as I can make it. So number 1, communication. I think it was inappropriate for HUD to send this letter with no prior contact with the director as to the level of negativity of this so-called review of her agency. B, I was stunned that this letter was sent to individuals outside of our agency prior to permitting our response. C, I think it was unprofessional to send it to that list and not even include the director as a copy. I did not receive the letter. D, HUD told us that this review was a tool to help us fix problems. The review itself was sorted by weather and then by COVID. There was one phone call and some other phone and electronic communications with the staff. E, it is supposed to be a review through December 2018, pardon my typos, by the way. However, it appears to take us to and include issues related to 2020. It was very confusing to me what the scope of this review was and what it was supposed to be. And finally, this is not this letter and its approach. So, 2, content. A, it is clear to me that the reviewers, in quotes, don't understand, end quote. And these numbers may be wrong, and if we intend to use this document as a cover letter, I will have to fix my resident numbers. I said that of 56,000 or so residents in Manhattan, 20,000 or so left Manhattan, a ghost town, for mid-March through mid-August 2020, making it impossible to follow through on rent collection and evictions by law. B, recently, the director submitted a document concerning, and I'm supposed to say,
Changing market conditions.
changing market conditions is the proper name of that document. Because Manhattan is 30% under rented across the city. That request, by the way, was denied. C, this review was presented in a way that is not measurable, using such terms as seems to be and don't understand, doesn't understand, etc. Since no interviews were conducted and no specific questions were asked, there is no way for the reviewers to know that these things are true. And in fact, a lot of them are not true. D, to suggest that there are no policies as they listed is ridiculous. And since they didn't ask to see these policies, the comments they made are just wrong, they're incorrect. E, the suggestion that staff is unskilled is ridiculous. I have been on this board for 9 years. During that time, I have attended numerous regional and state meetings where multiple people have told me how lucky we are to have one of the best educated and most experienced directors in the system. It has been my experience on this board that our director can explain, repeat, and navigate the extensively difficult system in an extremely knowledgeable and professional manner. F, the denigration of this board is offensive, and dangerous for the agency. Putting us in a negative light could hurt our relationship with the city and other partners. Insulting this board of unpaid volunteers can result in future difficulty in recruiting new board members. Who wants to be on a board to risk this kind of abuse? G, as regards the towers in particular, the board was provided with facts, legalities, costs, and implications at each step. The director worked with HUD on each step, got information and recommendations from them, and followed every rule and direction from us and them in the process. Their slow response and underfunding of the grant cost us a lot of extra money. In addition, they gave and took back funds on several occasions, and that's delineated in Joanne's response. These two facts forced us to seek other funding. Requesting funds from the city was at their suggestion, and the director received praise for the success of getting that grant. Now they claim the debt is a problem. 3, history. When I came onto the board, there were many more staff than we have now. The existing staff is doing all the work that some 22 people did at one time. B, we are funded at as low as 62% of requested funding in some areas and in some years. C, we have a low retention of rate of employees at some levels because our salaries are not competitive, and when the staff is short, the work requires around-the-clock responsibilities that burn people out. 4, Joanne prepared the document that you received exactly as I asked her to develop it. She and I spent about 2 hours discussing the letter line by line through tears. You can see that she and Mandy were able to find significant documentation and wrote extensive information that shows that the reviewers were inaccurate, incomplete, and indeed unfair. I know the world isn't fair, and in our discussion, Joanne revealed my greatest fear, that she felt that she was punched in the gut and that maybe she should just revise her retirement date to September 30th. I think I've talked her out of that. 5, finally, for the last 4 years, in addition to trying hard to solve the problems presented by the towers, HUD, and consequently our agency, has been frustrating under an administration that's undercutting housing efforts across the board. I think the last sentence of the letter demonstrates HUD's effort to lay blame on us when the atmosphere in which we are working frustrates our mission. I am sorry if indeed I have not provided proper leadership and failed you all in some way. I hope you know that both Joanne and I will do everything we can to resolve this issue with your help. I will expect a revision of this review based on the information you will provide. I think the board and the staff deserve an apology. We can demand it, but I doubt it. Most sincerely, me. Okay, so not sure how we want to start.
Did you send this to them?
I did not send this document only to us. This is an internal. This is just for us.
Okay.
I wanted you to know how I felt after hearing how she felt. What she wrote, what she and Mandy wrote, is more or less what I think we should use as a response, although we may want to discuss how it's written and some of the content, because some of the content is repeated because they went line by line through the beginning of the letter, and then they went line by line through the summary. And so some of the answers to some of the things are the same. And so they repeated some of that information in here, which we probably won't want to do when we respond to HUD.
Before we start talking about our response, can you maybe have an opportunity to ask the questions?
Absolutely.
Just about what went wrong. I don't necessarily need to.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if anybody else wants to make a comment or has questions, we could do that now. And then if you want, we can then go through what
first question is, can you give us the exact date of when the audit started, the assessment started, and what was requested versus what was provided?
I can give you, I don't know if I can give you exact dates.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
Not like-
In here.
Yeah.
So I believe it was in about August, 2019, August something, when we got the letter advising that we were, in troubled status for the 2018 review. And I brought that to the board at that time. And you might recall that when I did, I said, this is no surprise, we expected it before now. And since that time, we've had at least monthly communication with the field office, either the asset manager, who's kind of the management representative, or the financial analyst, looks at the financials.
So how does that monthly correspondence relate to the assessment? Is that direct to the assessment or is that a tangent discussion?
It's just, it was, well, it'll come clear when I continue on. So it's something that they're required to do, especially when an agency's in trouble status. They, monitor the vacancies, they monitor the financial reports, monitor anything that may have contributed to that status. And through every conversation we've had with them, it's been, we get it, we just gotta go through this. We're gonna just get through this, and we understand it was kind of out of your control. We understand why this happened, how it happened, and you're making progress, so that's good. And I believe it was in December that the asset manager and the financial analyst came to the housing authority, or they didn't even call it a review, they called it just a site visit. And we sat in the community room and we talked for, I don't think they were here more than 4 hours. They didn't go through and look at policies and all that kind of thing. They had developed some slides, and we went through and we kind of talked about the causes and effects, and that was it. And we talked a little bit about RAD. Then they were required to do what was called an on-site monitoring review, and it was initially scheduled for sometime in February of 2020, and it was postponed because of weather. I think it was snowing and icing that day, and so they called and said they were going to postpone it, and so then it was scheduled for March 17th, I believe, St. Patrick's Day. But in the meantime, COVID blew up. And so they called and said, we'll either postpone it or we'll do it remotely. And that was, so then they scheduled the phone call, and Jan and Linda and Phil were in that phone call. And Mandy, myself, Perry was the facility supervisor at the time, and Patrick, housing manager. And they had provided kind of a slideshow presentation. Well, let me back up a little bit. They had asked us to prepare a recovery plan, which we had done a draft plan, sent it to them, and we discussed it during that phone call that day.
And we that, don't we have-
After our phone call, we made a couple of tweaks to it based on their recommendations, HUD's recommendations, and brought it to the board for approval. And I sent it to them, I believe, on March 23rd. I think the date's in here somewhere. I went back through emails and found all this stuff. And so the board approved it, we sent it to them, and we were told that the next step would be that HUD would take that, kind of put it into their format, do a memorandum of agreement, and it becomes an official document, and we do these things and move on. That's the last I heard of it, except for the monthly monitoring calls. I heard no more about it until, well, last month
Joanne, one moment, what month was that phone call?
in March.
Okay, so that was in March.
And I think it was early in March before everything shut down. Because we came here for that call.
Before everything shut down here, but it was bad in Kansas City.
Okay.
Yeah.
Since we were here on site.
And I know you're still talking, so if this, or said something, but, so the recovery plan, just to be clear, was discussed in that phone call, vetted by the representative you were talking to, then you reviewed it following that, and then resubmitted to them to put together the memo of the. Sorry.
That's okay. You want my voice water?
And they're all.
Our attorney is getting everything in order.
Not an attorney. That's all.
So, in July, we got a letter via email, and I mentioned it in my monthly report, or no, I think in my monthly report last month, that HUD was doing a remote PH assessment, public housing assessment. I didn't think that had anything to do with this recovery plan, because it wasn't mentioned that it did, and it seemed kind of, it just, you know, HUD randomly selects housing authorities at different times to do different reviews. So we really didn't think too much of it. We compiled everything they asked for and sent it to them.
So that's kind of, I think, more in line with the question I was wondering is, so this specific assessment that we received a letter for wasn't necessarily, at the time that all these things were happening, you didn't recognize it was going directly towards a specific assessment, even though obviously everything.
And they only got those documents, August 24th. And so there's no way they looked through all those documents, and the documents they asked for did not include the policies that were mentioned in here. So I just did not put two and two together. I just said, oh,
And did they send a letter, was it a standard letter request? Was there any verbal communication?
no,
And you would have been the direct contact for that, like they wouldn't have, because they mentioned in the letter that they talked to key staff and stakeholders.
So she's key staff and stakeholders here.
Yeah. Because we don't know anybody else that they would have talked to on the staff or in involvement. I mean, obviously they didn't talk to any of us. Maybe stakeholders, I don't know. if we directly do that.
no, stakeholders, when they say stakeholders, they mean the residents
Okay,
and people in the community.
and to your knowledge, who do they talk to when they do that? Have they ever done that?
I remember HUD doing that one time when they came for a fair housing review, and it wasn't because we'd done anything wrong, it was just one of those, pick a housing authority, go do a fair housing review. And the HUD staff, the fair housing staff went out and talked to residents, and I don't know, I don't remember that they talked to a board member. They may have, it's been a while. But that's the only time I remember them ever going out and talking to residents.
So any correspondence to your knowledge went through you and then accidentally end up on someone else's desk or go to somebody else somehow that you wouldn't be aware of? I'm just asking, because I'm just trying to understand the letter and the thread. And then the last assessment prior to this was the troubled debt, or troubled status in 2019. So that was the last one, and we had monthly interactions where you submitted, did you submit our minutes monthly, or what did you provide them?
No, we submit our financial reports, as soon as we get them from the city accountant. We also, and they will send us from the online systems a list of what they show as vacant. And we give them an update and say, oh, this unit's been leased up, this one's scheduled for lease up, this one's not ready yet, this one's this one, you know, this is status on each one of them. And that's it. I sent it back to him, email. Sometimes we talk for, briefly about the financial reports or the vacancies or, whatever, but it's not a lengthy conversation by any means. And the next thing I heard was, I got this forwarded from Jan, and like, I won't say what I said.
So, those are, I have more questions, but those are the, overview ones, the rest of them more in terms of response and your response. So I think, you can more questions regarding the, kind of the initial letter first, and then maybe questions about our response. And kind of how things happen there. Any other questions?
You went off on my questions with the timeline distraction. No, I think a lot of my answers are here in the timeline.
I have, sorry,
Go ahead.
I did have a conversation with the asset manager. She called about something. She called because we were gonna talk about our Section 8 two-year tool. It's kind of our forecasting tool that we use to decide how many vouchers we can put out on the street without going into shortfall. And that was a short conversation, and we got done with that conversation. She was about to hang up. I said, not so fast. And she knew that I was, we'll just say she knew that I was very upset. I was in tears before the conversation was over. I let her know that I was very insulted to have not been copied on this letter and what happened to the recovery plan that we submitted. And she told me I could forget about it. They're doing a whole different process now. And so I said, well, when was somebody going to tell me?
So when did she say this? When was the conversation?
It was, I think, the same day I talked to Jan. That was on Friday, Thursday.
We got the letter on Tuesday.
The letter was dated on the 3rd. It came to me on the 2nd.
No. Well, it came to you the day that we got it.
That was on the 2nd.
So she said that we could forget about the recovery fund in terms of it's meaningless, it doesn't matter to them at all, or that.
Yeah, it's just kind of null and void, and they're taking a whole different process, and
Did she give any indication of what that fund is? Find out what that is.
no, not really.
And I asked specifically, because I just did research on that over the last week, and right now, for all the documentation through HUD, the process is still exactly what you described, recovery plan, federal agreement, UDD, one which needs, and I have this all on my computer and I can send it out, but
I would love that.
currently, as of today, it's still that on various documentation. So if they've changed that in the last month, then it doesn't seem like I think this is March, we sent our recovery plan with no response whatsoever.
According to her, it was,
On the back, first paragraph on the back of your memo, it says, we did not hear back from HUD about the recovery plan until I inquired about it after receiving the September 3rd HUD letter, at which time I was told that management didn't accept it, quote,
yes, she did say
and
that.
we should, quote, forget about it. During this conversation, I advised the field officer that we had never received notification that the recovery plan had not been accepted, nor that it was now an invalid document that should be disregarded.
And I did, yep, I said those things to her. And,
And this is the person that emailed us, right?
Yeah, but it's not the person who wrote the letter. It's not the person who signed the letter.
She says, I was informed that since MHA had been determined insolvent, there's a different process.
There were 2 signatures on the letter, right?
However, it's just, they say it's still unclear.
just trying to clarity.
Patty was on there too.
So I guess that is some of the other questions, is
Yeah.
that in the,
She was copied on it.
in the,
She's the portfolio manager.
Yeah.
It's Patty Bennett, but this letter was signed by Francis.
Well, now she's a portfolio.
in the August 2019 troubled status, was that when you were declared insolvent or?
18.
or-
Sometime, yeah. They are not, scoring for 29.
But was that when we were declared insolvent, or was that,
28.
and that was part of our status specifically said we are insolvent, or because I can't remember, I don't have that in front of me. Did that troubled status indicate specifically that we were insolvent?
No, it just said that we were in trouble.
And at what point were we declared insolvent?
I don't think you've ever gotten anything in writing saying we're insolvent.
I want to go back to that letter notification. Because they.
The troubled
told us-
status notification?
I'm just talking, I don't know what was in it, but I know that at one point we were told 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the things that we needed to do, and you did address those, I think, in your text. But I couldn't find the letter back from back then.
I think it was an email.
No, I don't know, maybe it was,
In 2008, whether it's up
yeah, because it was a shocker then, also. Kind of like this one.
It was a shocker in the sense that it wasn't planned, but it wasn't unexpected because we knew what was going on. They didn't see
Out of the highway.
You know, I'm not gonna say that in any of the letters, it wasn't said, the word insolvent wasn't used. But we were not, let me say it this way, we were not made aware that there's a different process. I thought trouble, financial trouble and insolvent were all the same thing. Put it that way.
I would like us to do that letter and see if at any point from that letter forward, they have specifically stated we are insolvent.
Yeah.
And what that's not.
And I know they used that word in our phone calls, they may have used it on their phone call that day.
So then maybe another process for insolvent. Or
Well-
if you want to look to find out.
If there is, what I want to know is which category it falls into. And if you're the overlap, if you draw a Venn diagram of this situation, if we're in the middle of that overlap, what would you do about the middle of two issues? So we could be in the middle of one, or focus on one. And at what point you fell into. two
Yeah, when that happened.
So February 4th, we got the letter stating that we were trouble.
So that wasn't until February 4th, and so then shortly February 4th of this year,
Yeah,
Well, we got something back.
and then we hit COVID.
in August, there was a letter saying you're trouble.
Yeah, yeah.
So we had,
That letter's in here somewhere.
so we had 2 letters saying that we're troubled, August of 2019 and February 2020.
I think we got one, the troubled one was in August. The one in February, it was called, in the email, it was called a troubled status take action letter. And this is the one where they requested the recovery plan be submitted within 30 days.
So really, it's not just saying that the law kept us.
Well, HUD has not exactly kept the ball in play. They waited 7 months to tell us they wouldn't fund the windows. I mean, we were just on hold, I think. They just were not very responsive.
So, so there's kind of your timeline. I'm pretty sure the initial letter is in here somewhere. If not, I will go back and find it.
So I was gonna ask, and I don't want us to spend a lot of time, but before we respond, I mean, not to delay tonight, I can jump in with me, but before we send a formal response, I'd like to see a timeline from the first couple of status to now with the material correspondence that they provided to us. So Not being like those monthly phone calls, just like we say monthly phone call, but everything else, like any indication of something, anything that they ask specifically for in writing. I'd like to see that and then be able to have an idea of where we might have not connected the dots. Because when I read this, most of my thoughts went to, this is just wrong, and you've answered that, but, and I think your answer ended that, I think that, you need to really hone in on where that disconnect fell, because they clearly made a stance, a very concise and clear stance, and we're going to respond as appropriately as we need to, but I think we also have to have a concise, response, and then all the material backed up. So that's the area, seeing exactly where we gave this, what they asked for, or what we were supposed to be understanding.
I'm concerned that 30 HUD people passed this letter around before they ever sent it.
That was what she told me. She told me, Patty Bennett told me that this letter had been floating around for some time. And it had been back and forth, and I talked to the financial guy today, actually. He told me, oh yes, this letter's been all over the place.
Why? Why is this order all over?
Oh, because apparently somewhere along the line, they changed the process, and it had to go from the field office to the regional office, to headquarters, back to regional, back to field office, and I don't know, but, you know, headquarters.
I think we need to understand that, because that to me speaks that this isn't just our issue. If they are having to pass a simple review letter around 30 different people because they're not sure if what they're saying is the right thing to say, they need to answer that as well. And I don't know how we would respond to that as something that needs to be made clear, because if it came down to just somebody saying, just send me a letter, then that's not okay.
Yeah, she told me on the phone, at least 30 people, right? Mindy was sitting in my office, I had her on speakerphone. And she said that letter went through at least 30 people. Including people in the Denver office, which I guess is probably the regional office,
Thank you, Linda. There's another one, we'll send them your way.
which wouldn't know what's going on in Manhattan, Kansas for anything. And
Is this happening other places? Does your Naro network
not that
talk
I'm
about
aware of.
stuff like that happening?
Yeah, and I would recommend you go around and ask some questions.
No, I'm not either, but I mean, I almost think we're a test case here or something.
Well, you saw my last comment. This is political.
They're expecting a response from the board. I told them, I said, I'm not happy, the board's not happy, and you'll be getting a response, and it might not be pretty.
And, you know, as we talked about, you mentioned it, Patty's mentioned it. When you say something to somebody that they've done something wrong, and you expect them to fix it, you do that in measurable terms. The way this letter is written, you know, they don't understand, they don't seem to think, they don't, you know.
It's not typical language that you would
It is-
see in
It's
some.
very unprofessional. And because we can't go back and say, well, for 6 times, 6 phone calls, or, I mean, they're not asking that. They're just telling us they're saying things about us that are not true, that are inaccurate.
So, I don't want to step
And
on words, but
You know,
the good thing in that we should focus on is that gives us a lot more opportunity to debate it than if they had quantified it with things that we just said, oh, shoot, you're right. But in this case, we need to come up with a very precise response saying exactly that. This is, you indicate that we seem to have not been paying attention or whatever the exact wording is. But in fact, this is the documentation for the last 3 years that demonstrates, since 2018, that demonstrates that we have been attentive to this. This is exactly, and that's where a timeline comes into play. Outline in a specific timeline of exactly what was requested, exactly what was provided, and any further like items that maybe weren't fully acknowledged?
It's all in my email. And I did find one email, I'll admit it, I found one email that I got from the head office that I went, what is this email? But, and in that email, they were, I think it was an email from like the assistant director who had received, or who had reviewed the, changing market conditions request and made some suggestions that we rent to over income people, which, okay, we can consider that, we can make that request. I have some reservations about that, but because there's a lot of, there's a few strings attached to that, that's kind of another discussion, but, I did, if I read it, I didn't remember reading it.
So in other
before,
words,
but-
they're telling you to break the rules.
No, you can rent to over income, you have to have permission to do it. And they can only stay for, I think, 2 years. And if somebody else comes and applies, a low income person, and you need the unit they're in to house them, you gotta make a move so we can house the low income.
So it's a special leave in order to.
I think so, yeah, I really don't know the details because I've never really been interested in renting to over income people.
Sounds complicated.
But, and maybe that's why I don't remember reading it, because I went, but, I mean, we'll do what we have to do to get the units linked up, but I also feel like this is a push to reposition and get rid of public housing.
It might be, but that doesn't change.
That's right, that's
Like,
right.
That's a political stance that very well could be the case. So I don't want us to hang our hats on that and just say, oh, it's out of our control, they want public housing gone, they don't want to fund us. Like, it does read like that, and even the media follows that suit in the 2018 decisions. I think we talked about it extensively in here, but also currently, like the impact of that, like the lack of funding, our inability to get additional funding for different things, wasn't just us, that was widespread. It was in the media, it was recognized.
I need to go a little, I'm sorry to cut you off, but I need to go a little bit further back also and see when we started talking about EPC, because energy performance contract, because we talked about that for a while before we did anything.
Oh, we talked about it for months before.
Yeah, and I think when did we sign that contract? I think in 2015, finally we signed it.
I feel as if I wasn't here yet.
I would,
in process, yeah.
I looked at that timeline, and everything's happening in the 07, 08, 2012, and 2013.
Well, no, the energy performance contract discussion started somewhat before the towers crashed. And so by the time we got around to it, with thoughts from Johnson Controls, we decided it would be wise to do them together. So we started talking to them before that happened. And then we
Yeah, we did.
ultimately hooked them together.
We did hook them together, and Johnson Controls' scope of work did change a little bit when they learned that we weren't gonna be able to upgrade the HVAC system using the HUD funds. And they were able to squeeze that in there and get the majority of our energy savings from that system in this building. But we also didn't get to start counting our energy savings until the building could be reoccupied. So I got kinda
And
out
HUD
of the
lied
weeds
to
there.
us about when things would be considered back online. But essentially, we thought the building wouldn't be considered back online until it was actually back online. However, they started counting it back online prior to the time that we could actually put people in there.
So as units became vacant, the units went offline. for modernization, so they're no longer on the rec rolls. And as we got closer to the end and started talking about leasing, HUD had told us, and it was the portfolio manager, asset manager, whatever you want to call her. It was a him at the time. Told us that those units would stay offline until they were leased up. And it was kind of a in passing conversation that we had. And I began to think, well, surely there's got to be a sundown to that, because they're not gonna just let the units stay offline forever. And about that time, we got an email saying that, oh no, they can only stay offline for 36 months. Well, some people moved out in 2014.
You know, we're gonna need a timeline, probably. That would be helpful, because we keep searching and thinking and trying to come up with.
It's just one long thing of misinformation that I mean, we received from that.
So that just added on to our vacancy days, because, I mean, units had to come back online before they were ever,
We weren't even finished being constructed.
we didn't have a certificate of occupancy.
And all this is, I mean, this is good for our memories of the situation, but at the end of the day, we need to be able to put this into, use your word, something quantifiable and then to back to them. Because they're gonna do exactly what we're doing, where they'll say, well, so-and-so was who you were talking to at that point in time. This is what's going, like, we need to be able to present this in a very concise and quantifiable manner right back to them. And not just back to them, but in lieu of the fact that they didn't do that for us.
No.
February 4th letter, is it?
Yeah, the February 4th one is,
August 19th.
yeah.
So, I was gonna ask if we could start going through the specific responses and specific items that were identified and the responses, unless, again, I don't understand why you guys are. I'm thinking about this a lot, and I just wanna make sure that we are addressing things so that we can respond in a timely and very appropriate way.
When are you thinking that we need to respond?
Um,
As a result of this meeting, or do we have another meeting that, like, we're gonna call them next week
Well, we have a regular.
to finalize?
we have a regular meeting next week. There's no deadline in there.
I know, but when are you thinking we should respond?
Should we send a short? Yes. We are working on a line by line response to the review.
No, I don't
No,
think we
no,
tell
no.
them line by line.
I think we should send a response that identifies that the board is meeting on this and discussing a thorough response to their comment.
We have received your letter.
And should that come from Joanne or does it need to come from
It
me?
should come from our board. It should absolutely come from our board. We'll be the letter that we do.
Okay, Joanne, do you want to write that? And I can see, we're going to do it electronically. You have my electronic signature.
Do you want me to write it and send it out to everybody to read before it gets sent?
This is just the little acknowledgement.
Just the
I'm not worried
acknowledgement
about
that-
it. This
I am.
letter,
I am.
yes.
Yeah. And it's not that I doubt you in any way, shape, or
I
form.
understand.
Because
This is a
But you
motion.
might have a good suggestion for a line.
That's an understatement.
yeah,
I don't really want to say, have you say line by line, just that.
No, I won't say, I'll say
received your
thorough.
letter.
Maybe so.
there's two reasons I say that.
Our board is preparing a response, we just want to let you know that our board is preparing a response, that says it.
More detailed response.
They made a statement by sending this directly to Dan and excluding you from it. And in that statement, we need to respond in suit. But I do think we should CC you on it so they know you're included in it. Like, I don't think you're excluded from this, but there's a power play that they're presenting in this. And we need to, as a board, acknowledge that we're
Is it,
there.
should Joanne and Jan sign it? And then it's a united front going forward.
We could do that. We may both sign it.
more strength
Is
there.
there a benefit in Joanne signing it?
Well, I think there might be because they excluded her. We were not excluded.
On the contrary, it could seem as if we're more, like we're too in bed with Joanne, excuse me, for the term, but it could seem as if we're too friendly with Joanne and not maintaining professional boundaries.
I'm good with whatever you want me to do.
So I
It was
understand,
addressed to you, so maybe you should be the signer.
I definitely understand the desire and wanting to include Joanne to say like, we're supporting her, but I also think that that's part of why they didn't do it. Is to send a message to us. And so if we respond and say, yeah, we can respond and say in our letter that we support her without necessarily including her, because we're taking her out of the fight, we're
Without saying
fighting on behalf.
Okay.
I just view it as a perfunctory kind of acknowledgement, but in the spirit of good communication, which hasn't been going on here, we need to acknowledge.
I think that's really, I don't want them to think we're ignoring this.
Yeah.
And so, and it's
No,
not,
they know you're not.
well, I know you talked to Patty.
And Ron.
The paper trail is what's important.
I understand.
That's what they're looking at. They're not saying one thing about the conversations that they've had with you. They're looking at only the paper trail.
Well, and they're not even looking at the paper trail because they didn't ask for policies and they, they didn't talk anything. So I think they need to know that we think this is important, that we're concerned, that we are responsible people. And in being responsible, we are preparing a detailed response. Because they suggested that we're not responsible, which makes me really angry.
We didn't suggest it, they
Not
said it. They
ready,
said it. It
Not
wasn't a
ready,
suggestion.
willing, or able.
The other thing we need to keep in mind in our responses, and Joanne, I hope that you appreciate this more than anything, given your time here, but is that we as a board, or the board, whoever on it, we might be dealing with this long after Joanne's gone. And so that is a piece that we need to keep in mind in our responses, is that if we put too much on Joanne and it gets partially resolved, her replacement may or may not be in a position to step in at that exact time. And that's a piece that we need to, as a board, be clear that we need to show that we're aware and active and able to manage it.
And that's why the paper trail is so important too.
That's why I think that Jamie's suggestion is that we start with a timeline. And then maybe some of this response would be attached to that timeline. This is what happened when, this is what we did.
Asking each other.
Well, and you need to have like a 1 or 2 pager that they can read, because they didn't read the documents you sent last time. I can't imagine that they're going to want to read a book of responses. So we really need to be able to express ourselves concisely.
Yeah, I almost feel like you wouldn't want to send this whole, first of all, they have, like the inspection reports, we don't need to send them that, they have that.
But we need it not, I mean,
Yeah, you needed it, but they don't.
I,
Second of all, I think if they want to, if they want to see a policy, they should ask for a policy.
but are they?
no,
I mean, that's the thing, if we're getting cited, we're not providing something that they didn't ask for, we need to tell them, you didn't ask for this, and we will.
not only are they saying that we didn't provide it, they never asked.
Right.
That's even worse.
But we need to respond to what they cited, so if they cited us for not providing or not having a policy in place for certain things, we need to say,
We would have gladly provided it.
And because all of our policies are dated too.
We could put in our.
Show whatever in place. I think we should be reasonably brief, but I do not think we should be terribly brief.
We don't want to be
Because
vague.
there are too many accusations in here that need to be responded to specifically.
so it's gotta be.
That may take more than 2 pages.
I think we need to have the summary that's brief and makes the point, and then we need to supplement it with the backup.
Right.
Like, that way, because keep in mind, if this letter got passed around to 30 people, 30 people aren't gonna read more than the summary. They're gonna read the intro letter and then they're gonna go, okay.
You have about 2 minutes probably in the
Well-
30 seconds to 2 minutes, and they're gonna scan it, they're not gonna even read it in depth.
So are they gonna do anything about it if they don't read it?
That's on them.
They're, yeah, as long as we present a good, solid argument, it doesn't matter what they choose to do. We just need to place ourselves in a position where we can defend ourselves. And right now, we're not there.
And we may
And
want to
that also
ask
could
them
be-
for some information.
That could be, we insist on a follow-up of a meeting. Face to face, and it could be on Zoom, but
I think our board needs to have a meeting with the reviewer.
I think so too.
I do.
they need to look us in the eye and say, you don't seem to understand. Because,
Well, and I'm curious, so this cover letter is Francis and Cleary, but this is based on our review. Who exactly wrote this?
Yeah,
Like,
she's the director, she didn't do it.
I don't have a clue.
whoever wrote it, was the reason it got passed around because it wasn't agreed? Like, everybody was passing it around, it was like, I don't wanna send this.
I asked Joanne to write the document to us. I think that he's- For a few reasons. Number one, I looked her in the eye through her tears, and I said, you need to get out of here and into your real life. And you need to look at each line, and you need to find the documentation and present your case mechanically. And to go through it, and I requested her to go through it line by line, the way they did it, and Mandy and Joanne worked on this for hours. So that it would help clear her mind, their mind, so that they would have a clearing, to bring back all the memories of all the times and the dates and stuff. So that, they can see what I felt immediately about how inaccurate and inappropriate this so-called review was. And so what you see is exactly what I asked her to do. And it's way too long and it has way too much data, but it was a way to focus on the problem and not on how angry and hurt she is or angry and hurt I am or we are, but to really mechanically delineate exactly what we know.
Frustrated is a real big word.
Well, frustrated isn't strong enough. So I just want you to know that this came to you because I asked her to write it exactly this way.
No, I'm not criticizing what we have in front of us. I think we need this. But
Right.
what we respond with needs to be
Right.
different.
Neither my personal response to you guys today, or this is what we're gonna send.
Right.
But it helps us figure out what we want to send.
So to that point, should we start for a second?
Sure.
Well, can we just have Phil or Libby, you haven't asked any questions? Do you have any?
I think
before we jump in?
My stuff is more nitty gritty, just response.
Okay.
So you don't have a copy of the big document. Is there another copy of the big document?
At the door.
So that you can follow, because that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna go line by line through this three things. So you might want to have it.
Not all of it.
There's the first 2 pages appear to be basically a formula. The other summary that they have is obviously whoever wrote this has no idea what they're talking about. And that's the frustration I think that we all feel. And I think our response needs to be very professional and documented. And I've been on a number of boards, but I haven't been on a board that I don't expect really this one. This is like almost like I don't know how to respond to it. No, not at all.
I mean, I wouldn't mind them saying,
were incapable if they actually had our CVs or resumes sitting in front.
Yeah.
Well, I do have a concern that as a board, we are not seeing the final monthly financial reports. We're getting by using the fee accountant tentative, and I don't think we ought to be doing that.
No,
I'm just saying, my concern, because I've asked about it at least twice. And so I'm just, there are things that we need to see to do something else with this.
the fee account reports are not tentative.
Well, the monthly
Those are
things
what are
we see,
audited.
the monthly reports we get in our packet are not the final for the month, is what I've been told in the past, and that's what this says here.
In 2018, Linda?
No, now.
Aren't we
No.
usually
That's
like the
another
month
thing.
behind on
Answer to them so that we can get it clear up.
Huh?
Say what you're gonna say, so that we're not speculating.
When we have them back from the fee accountant in time, that's what's in the board packet. The ones that at the bottom say are in-house reports and unaudited are the ones that Mandy's had to put together because we didn't have the monthly financial reports
And
back
that's
from the
what, one of
fee
those,
account.
that's one of the things you're getting nailed on here.
But it's not
I'm just
right,
saying,
but it's not right.
I'm just saying, what it says at the bottom of the report that the board gives. So we need to fix this somehow.
If you go through our minutes and you look at the financial statements, how often, because it's not just a month in time, you see the full year to date. So how is that factored in the fee accountant's fees as well as ours? And how often are we only getting hours versus? And if you don't know the answer right now, that's just something we need to have.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head. I can tell you we're getting them a lot more now on time than we were from the previous fee account. In 2018, we were getting them 5-6 months after the fact. We had to do them in-house. And that's
But
why we
that's
got
been
rid of that
largely
fee account.
corrected since,
Huh?
that's largely corrected since we have to do.
But most of the time, we have them on time. But here's what you have to consider is that when month end rolls around, there's a lot of work on our end that has to be done before the report, before the financials go into the fee account. We get around, Mandy does her dangest to get them to them by the 5th of the month. And we expressed to the fee account we awarded them the contract, and one of the reasons we were leaving the other fee accountant was because they were late on everything, our monthly financials, our annual submissions, and they did assure us that it wouldn't be a problem. It has been a problem on a couple of times. I think the accountant was out sick at one
On vacation.
It's the
vacation.
the third item under governance is the accusation.
She wrote a response to this. Can you use this as a moment to read this response and address how it's addressing here and how we'd like to see it addressed for our awareness as well as in our response? I don't have speech numbers, but I think it's like the over 50.
It's item 3 under governance.
Review of board minutes did not show any interaction on financials other than the board's legal. You find that section?
Are you looking at her?
Yeah, I'm looking at our packet. And the response that Andy and Joanne put together in regards to that statement. And it says that it talks about the fee account, and it talks exactly about what you just described about how we interact with this specific section, or if it's in a couple different sections, but due to the former fee accountant's delinquency and submitting monthly and year financial statements in a timely manner and the amount of time required by the new fee accountant. So I think, to Linda's point, we talk about how that was acknowledged and addressed in the board discussion and in our decision to change accountants. But also specifically state in the last, 12 months or however long it's been since this 24 months, this issue has only occurred in these 2 or 3 board meetings that maybe the statements were in-house prepared. And before we respond to that point, we as a board need to look at that and make sure we're satisfied with that response so that it doesn't end up getting of this time, 75% of the time, we were looking at in-house prepared statements. To me, that would make a difference than if it was 10%, you know, just so we're aware, so we can draft our response appropriately. Did everyone find what it was?
I did.
I did.
But also, when you get those financial statements, Andy makes a very clear cover page that summarizes and explains why something is a shortfall or an overage. So in their accusation that we don't ask any questions, we don't ask questions because we're providing the information.
And I guess that would be my other question is, in our minutes, I feel like we do a fairly thorough job of reflecting the comments in the minutes, but it'd be good to go back and pinpoint some of the minutes where we specifically acknowledge. I know there was one meeting, probably a year or two ago, where we specifically acknowledged that change in the way that it was presented and said, we like this is good, this is helpful, we want to see this. And so pointing out some of those points that we made in our meetings so that we can say, we specifically acknowledge this and we specifically acknowledge these issues or I think just making it noticed that in our minutes, we did specifically acknowledge and talk about things. So we talk about vacancy constantly, more than, given the market, more than what is even productive.
And you know, an interesting fact, speaking of vacancies, that Patrick pointed out to me yesterday when I met with all of the staff, was that every unit in this building, except for 2, have been occupied at one point since we reopened. But people have moved, or people have died, or people have been.
Have been evicted because we could, that's my point, because we do have an eviction policy.
So the vacancy piece, I think we need to talk about in a different manner and how we address that because we do talk about it a lot. But before we move on from the financials, is there anything else there that we need to hone in on in terms of their questions or their statements and our ability to respond? I mean, because I read that and I said, we do review the financials. We do a thorough job of having them presented in our board packets. If there's specific questions we should be asking, and at the end of the day, most of our financial issues aren't about the way our financials are handled. It's about the fact that we don't have occupancy numbers that meet what we expected when we did projections, which we do talk about. So it's an indirect discussion about our financial status. So I think that really honing in on the fact that we do receive audited statements, that we do review, we do discuss, and figuring out how to say that in a way that addresses their lack of quantifiable knowledge. So pointing out in the minutes when we do, or when we made adjustments and why we made those adjustments.
Also places where Joanne, like there have been times when I had a question about the financials and she addressed it in her director's report, where I didn't even have to ask the question because she already told me the answer. So there are times when it's happening.
And that was my point, in that I think whoever reviewed the minutes, they must have went online and did it, because I don't think I sent them to them. But they must have been reading the minutes and only the minutes, and not the board packet. Where, because there's other areas in the whole packet where they may have found their answers.
I guess to that point for board recommendation, going forward, even if it seems obvious, we need to acknowledge it and just say, you've already covered this, Joanne, but thank you for including this in your executive summary. Like we need to actually make that acknowledgement so that it's documented in the minutes of the board.
I think we have to be aware that the minutes are being read by other people with different motives and not just by us.
So that's the financial statements. Move on to vacancy, or we can move on to different. Where would you like to go?
So do we think the management response is covered
So the
in Joanne's document? Or governance, which one did we think we just covered?
That was the financial,
That was governance, I believe.
Under governance?
Right after that.
yeah, the third one.
All right, let's just go to the page that says governance. Does anyone have anything about anything on that page that isn't clear or that we need to discuss? I promise I read this whole thing, but it's kind of.
So in your response, did you address, and I read this, but now I'm talking about the absence of a plan to meet the regulated powers, you addressed that in there, you said you did have a plan to talk about before, during, and after. And you covered
We
that.
talked about it month after month after month. We started in 2017, working with that waiting list.
So we know this. I'm
Oh, yeah,
asking,
yeah,
do you feel
yes,
like that's
yes.
adequately acknowledged in this
Yes.
response that you drafted so far?
We even went back and found the 2017 letter we sent out to the people on the waiting list.
That's good.
And a copy of the marketing plan that we talked about, came up with, and, if they read in the minutes, there was, absolutely discussion about that.
But
marketing.
because it was pointed out to us in the February letter about marketing, we need to have a marketing plan. We sent our marketing plan into HUD
We ever said that marketing?
because we don't need to, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we don't need to, they didn't ask for it, I was paid to ask for it, I did. They did send me like a sample marketing plan, and almost everything on there was on ours already, so.
So in
Or
our
we were already
response,
doing.
in our response, okay, do that we drafted, throughout this process, we drafted a couple marketing plans. This you have the early version and then you have the February follow-up. But then you also utilize kind of format and specific items that they include on it in our marketing plan. And then the proof that we actually all proof that you're going to put out there.
Well, the marketing plan there, I'm not gonna lie and say that we've got everything checked off on that marketing plan.
But one of the things, we should be, you said we, when they just going online in September.
Into this month, yeah.
So that's another thing that we'll get checked off.
And guess what? A board member, despite their inability to be ready, willing, and able, helped us set up a Facebook page.
Well, a board member went to the Riley County Social Services agency meeting today and pitched the public housing in the top of the high rise, the studio, and need to fill it. And I've done it several times at the city commission, different times. So all of us are doing it in different ways. We have-
Yes, there you go. I mean, that's, I think you addressed some of those, but those are the items that you bullet point say, not only do we have a plan in place, but this is how actively.
So what, the Riley County Social Services, there's about 20 on each social service agency. And they have a monthly, right now, it's a monthly meeting. And there were 20 on the call. It's at a local location, right? I've pitched it to them before, at least I believe twice. I pitched from my forum at the city hall, with the city commission, when I can make announcements. It's not that I dwell on it a long time, but I do talk about their big vacancy. And that group has the capacity to refer people here.
Yes.
And you belong to another group, haven't you?
Community care champions. Yeah, and when we were in staff meeting yesterday, I reiterated that we need to get back involved with our CCSSA. Because, we're members, we,
They're sending out a newsletter by October 31st. That's the latest email.
I think I ran across something on my desk that out there the other day.
And I got a call afterwards from Dominique Saunders, who is a Northview, involved with MHK, helping people at grassroots level who are having financial issues. And she's with Northview Rising. She's caused office on Facebook. Anyway, and she wanted to know more about the building house. I referred her to you and the area agency because she's got working with a couple of people and housing is an issue for them. And I believe it's going to be a huge issue.
Oh, I think it's gonna get much bigger.
I think that statistic in us, the 60, that only 2 of the apartments in this tower have not been rented the whole time. Even though the other ones are more than that empty, that in the 2 years that we've been able to put people in this building, all but 2 of those apartments have been rented. So that's 86 out of 88 have been filled at one time or another. I think that's,
And some of them more than once.
I think that's a really good
I
statistic.
think I'd like to see you expand this marketing plan and deal with criticism. So not just present it as it is, but fill in a little bit of it to show what you've actually been doing, like the one on the website, that it is expected mid-October to be delivered. And just commentate over some of these that are, you can just look at and say, oh yeah, I can add this now. So that we can show what's been accomplished. And I think we need to expand this if we can, and find better and more ways to market. Because our marketing effort has been limited somehow. And I know the competition story, and on the other hand, there are people out there who need to find. So,
Well, you know, it's not only the competition, Linda, it's the sake of, we really need a person that has time to get out there on the streets and do it. Everybody here is, I mean, our plates are full, and I understand the need, I really do understand the need to do it.
But who's gonna do it and when? Oh, she got her.
Master.
The other thing you need to emphasize on the marketing plan is that this town is experiencing housing crisis. You can have all the marketing plans in the world. The demand is not there. There's so much available to marketing. That's key. Because if we were back 5 years, this would not be an issue.
And that's also a major point in our debt that we put on and everything else, because all of this happens simultaneously. And that increase in housing options, a decrease in population and student population, and just an overall deterioration in our, I mean, what's the town that had a 95% occupancy rate on a regular basis easily without effort. So I don't know where we're sitting today, but.
Well, I can tell you before this building ever went down, we never had a problem keeping the studio apartments filled. People take care, I'll take a studio, I'll take a 1-bedroom, I'll take what you got.
So we need to document that so that you, again, with the timeline, like, we also need to correspond in terms of how the city's vacant census line over that same line. Because it's not reasonable to expect us to have a 95% occupancy rate when the city itself is sitting at 70 or less. I don't know where we're at.
In 2010, we were 60% rental. I maintain that in 2020, we would have been 70%.
Occupancy or
Rental, in other words,
rentals
number-
or owner occupied?
most housing units in the city are not owner occupied.
But we don't know what the vacancy rate is right now.
Yeah, that's the data that's hard to get a hold of.
And the census is gonna, it's gonna be
Call,
busy.
the great company, call them and they can send something out. They use the card for it, or we can call anybody for it down, they advise them for it.
The occupied,
I mean, it's a fate, it's an estimate, of course, but it's market data that banks have to turn it into regular, for the same thing. I mean, banks have to report that kind of data, so they,
Annually.
So who's a good bank report as well?
I can call and find, I just want to see who's already paid for the report.
Yeah, I guess
$4,000
it's
or $5,000 report that that one time, so we'll just say
Yeah.
that we'll provide that little piece of,
Good.
and honestly, the appraisers will provide it to us.
I mean, I guess it's 70% in my comments, but the fact that she submitted rental conditions thing and they offhand rejected indicates that they don't understand what's going on here.
Well, they need a credible authority to say it.
And I have said many times that 95% requirement is replaced.
Say that Christina LaFleur or somebody can say it. The city is still doing their 60%. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, but said that 60% of properties are rental properties, but it's not a number of how many of those rental properties are here.
That was before the trail was built 620 out there on Marlette Avenue. You know it's not 60%.
Okay,
Well,
kind of.
just a small note now, just got approved for another, what I heard, I don't know that, I don't know that for a fact.
So on the second point, does anyone have anything that needs to be added?
That was the-
Where are you taking this to? The second bullet point, which is the second page, does not, in regards to the board is not willing. Ready or, yeah,
Financial, is that what you're on?
the board is not ready, willing, or able, that bullet point, just addressing what response that Joanne and Nancy have put together and kind of making sure we don't have any additional feedback we want to offer or request.
You're looking at the letter.
And no, at Joanne's response.
The letter bullet points corresponds to Joanne's response, so I'm looking at.
And also that we've allowed her to misuse funds. Remember when she didn't
Yeah.
misuse funds, so we didn't allow her to misuse funds.
Well,
You didn't misuse funds.
There's a,
I didn't just take money and go on a cruise, no,
But any way you use funds, you got permission to do that.
no,
so this is important, you need to know the answer, because,
yeah,
and you put in here that it is not an inaccurate statement, is that,
that's right.
it is not an inaccurate statement.
Because if you read on, I need my whiteboard.
We need a way to follow where you are in the stuff.
We're on
Down here where we can't see.
We're on the second
They're not page numbers.
I think I'm on page 6, and the top bullet corresponds to, the first thing under financial.
Bottom page 6 says.
It's
financial.
the,
The board is not ready, willing, and able to serve, is the bullet at the top of the page.
Yeah, it would be helpful for us when we have these documents, so we can have numbers, so that we can just say like 1, 2.
I'm the number 9.
According to my iPad, it says it's page 6.
So we're on the second bullet point, which runs the letter. The second bullet point, the board is not ready, willing, or able.
Right here.
And it corresponds to the second bullet point that Joanne and Mandy put together, which is approximately 3 pages.
Still under government.
3 pages, yeah.
And then specifically, as Dan said, at this moment, we're looking at the next page, the 4th page, where it talks about the use of funds, the inappropriate use of funds. So it starts with regard.
So, and it's got a little bullet saying,
And Joanne was just telling us that this is, it is accurate. So the statement, it is accurate to say that we misused money. Technically. You didn't
Technically.
embezzle money, you didn't steal money, but that there was a misuse of funds per what was allowed by the
Technically, yes, and let me explain this, because that just sounds, to a public person reading that, it sounds like I'm pocketing money and.
So
Yeah.
let's acknowledge that that's not what happened, and let's talk about what technically happened that
Okay.
made it so that it didn't.
I'll move past it.
Please, this is important.
So what happens is, first of all, let's talk about the Section 8 program. The Section 8 program, so expenses, when expenses come in, and in Section 8, the administrative expenses are mostly salaries and benefits. They pay for a small portion of like subscriptions or what's something else they pay for? Postage, internet expense, overhead costs. And so as the bills are paid, all our money, well, not all our money, our public housing general fund is in one bank account. Our Section 8 HAP money goes into, well, our HAP money and our administrative fees go into another bank account. When Mandy writes the checks, rather than write a check for the public account, housing account for 90% of a bill and another check for the other 10%, she writes everything out of the public housing account, reimburses out of the Section 8 account. Okay, so far you followed me? So after the bills are paid at the end of the month, which again, salaries and benefits is the biggest expense, there isn't always enough money in the Section 8. That hasn't sent us enough money to cover all the expenses. So that means that the public housing program has a receivable from the Section 8 program on the books.
We show that,
And we should have.
and we show it.
Is that like a
We show it,
journal
right?
entry?
Yes, and I'm very aware of it. We've talked about it, talked about it,
So how
talked
does
about it.
every other housing authority do
The same way.
it?
And
You gotta do it.
you gotta do it. I'm not gonna be the one
We don't know
to,
that. We don't know that we got to do that, so let's Joanne talk
you
about.
do gotta do it. I'm not gonna be the one to tell Kat she's gonna get her check next month.
No, I don't think we don't pay people, I mean, is there a different administration process that we should be doing in lieu of this one that we're being criticized for?
I mean,
So in the past, back in the day when we had reserves, back in that day,
back in the day,
would it have been effective to utilize our reserves in lieu of doing a receivable between the two programs?
I mean, this is the way we've always done this. It's just that Section 8 used to have more administrative fees because HUD funded us at 100%.
Now what is it?
Right now, it's 82%. It's been as low as 67%.
What causes that variance?
Congress,
The whim of Congress.
And that's our annual budget, but is it annually that's determined, or is it just random?
not in Section 8.
Does that administrative rate change?
It does annually.
Is it with the federal budget and congressional appropriations or?
Yes. And, hell, we get an administrative fee for every voucher that's leased up on the first of every month. So if we have 100 vouchers and the administrative fee is $35 a month, we get $3,500 for that voucher a year. So, I mean, that's literally how it's calculated. So they look at quarterly, they reconcile. How much HAP did we use? How much did we need? And there is no such thing as HAP reserves anymore because HUD holds our reserves. We don't have access to our HAP reserves. And
Do we have any by chance?
not at the moment, because, yeah, in the shortfall year, HUD decided it was okay to use our administrative fees to pay HAP. And they did it, they took the money and did it. But anyway. So every quarter, they reconcile that, And if our leasing is up, we get more administrative fees. If our leasing is down, we get less administrative fees. But we can't go too high, because if we go too high, we end up in a shortfall. And then we have to apply for shortfall money, and HUD doesn't like that. So it's a gamble, and they're about 6 months behind in reconciling. Right, Andy? 6 months, they're supposed to be a quarter behind, but
So if our peer agencies are doing it the same way, and never before have we criticized an audit or review for doing it this way, we need to address that in our response. And also, why are we now getting criticized? Did we do anything different, or did we do anything that planted red flags other than our overall vision?
the difference is that Section 8 doesn't always have enough money to reimburse public housing. So what they're saying is, we're using public housing monies to fund Section 8 activities.
So how often does that happen?
When we fall into shortfall, it'll happen because how long?
Is it happening now?
No, we are not in shortfall right now.
So when was the last time we were in trouble?
Okay.
The end of 2019.
So that was, as we talked about.
During this window there.
But we're really not. Because there's a bill in place to the Section 8 fund. There's a receivable in evidence. So it's,
But in the meantime, we paid those expenses to
Right.
public housing fund.
So we're
but she
lending
has,
money.
but Linda has indicated that, that we expect a payment, that we didn't do it. We only borrowed that money, we didn't misuse it.
We're still, so like, let's say these two accounts are separate, and we're not necessarily getting permission from anyone to do this. So technically, it's like we're stealing from one account to pay, we're stealing from, public housing.
We're rather from Peter to pay Paul.
Yeah,
With the
absolutely,
hopes that it'll all be good at the end.
right.
But there's a record.
But even with the record, it doesn't, I mean, if I rob you and I leave you a receipt or an invoice, it doesn't stop the fact that
If
I robbed
everything works out, I'll pay you back.
you. Exactly.
I mean, that's
An IOU.
Here's the thing, even if
Okay.
other people are doing it, we're still technically wrong. And when we address that, we need to have some humility about it and saying, okay, this is why we're doing it, rather than trying to defend the action. We just need to take ownership of that, because there are places where we can't attack.
And that's what I was trying to convey in this response.
Also, it's not currently happening.
Yeah.
Well, Section
will, if we.
Right.
Section 8 does currently owe public housing, but it will be paid back before the end of the year. We've already got a plan in place. It'll be done before the end of the year.
Okay, so when they reviewed our documents, were we or were we not in a place where we had
In 18.
You said the end of December of last year.
No, in 18, we had to utilize admin fees to pay for some portabilities that we were unaware of from our prior Section 8 coordinator.
But here's the issue, I
So
don't understand, we looked at 18, 19, and some 20. So,
we're not sure
We
what they
don't
looked
know.
at.
Even
But
though
either
they
way,
did,
we just said it
3 months
was
or
still
whatever.
happening up until the end of 2020.
Even though in their letter, they say for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2018.
okay, so, go ahead.
Oh, I just say, and like you said, we're not denying that we don't do this. So I don't think we fall on the defense side. I think we fall on the, how do we make sure we don't continue doing something that is putting us in violation of the Appropriations Act.
Exactly, and I also pointed out that the only way we can, we have made cost cutting, taking cost cutting measures. For instance, we don't even have a housing inspector anymore. Mike was a housing inspector. We're not replacing him. Huh?
That's the reason?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but we're not replacing him, so that's a savings to the Section 8 program.
that's gonna get us criticized because we also aren't.
No, he's still doing
No,
the
that's section
inspections.
8
I know, but what I'm saying is that's, I mean, we have to watch out what we say because we have to make sure we don't say something that's gonna inadvertently be criticized for a different thing.
Right. We don't wanna draw attention in
In
certain.
2018
But he was a section 8 inspector, not the public housing inspector.
In 2018, weren't we in that kind of a?
Well, he
fall-
did do some,
water
I'm sorry, public housing inspections.
In 2018, we were having some, what's the fall, waterfall, free fall? Shortfall.
It wasn't a waterfall.
Weren't we in shortfall then?
In 18,
No.
19, I think.
16.
Okay, so,
Aren't you?
so we know that this is happening. So we just have to address the fact that it's happened. We can also then say, we haven't done this in a long time. A year.
Well, we've already corrected the problem.
Yeah, the problem is corrected.
And we
It has
would be
been.
happy to take Doug's advice for how to handle. It's gonna happen again.
Yeah.
When they don't send us enough money to pay the bills.
I also tried to explain in here, so, okay, you want us to cut expenses back to 82%. If we cut the hours of the section 8 coordinator, who's the only employee in that department,
They become
then we're
more-
gonna be trouble in our CMAP score because our recertifications are gonna be late, our inspections are gonna be late. I mean, she can only do so much.
Listen, Ryan, do they care about our CMAP score? Does this specific reviewer care about that? I mean, is that gonna get us anywhere?
I don't
It
even,
matters to us.
Yeah.
But will it matter to them?
Right.
oh, yeah,
It will.
Why will it matter to them?
because if you could be troubled in section 8 just as easy as you could be troubled in public housing.
Yes, but does us being in trouble with section 8 matter to these public housing?
I don't know, because I don't know who did this review.
So I think what Jamie is saying is that we need to stay focused, and so we don't wanna keep bringing up things happening on one side if it's unnecessary in our response. If we need to come up with a second response for the second program, we can do that.
So they limit the amount of section 8 money we get. Do we have any money for section 8? Can we lease out to section 8 people now? Aren't we capped money-wise?
No, we're at a point where we can issue a few vouchers,
Yeah.
but you get HAP funds and you get administrative funds. HAP funds pay the housing assistance payments. The administrative funds pay the salaries and the benefits and all of that.
Right.
And if you're at shortfall, you can pay the HAP with the administrative money, but you can't pay administrative expenses with HAP. Or you're not supposed to pay for public housing. Gotta
So-
pay the bills.
So in summary, this used to happen and it's not happening anymore. So the accusation that we're doing that is not true.
But it is
We did
happening.
it, but we're not doing it anymore.
It's only
Just
not
say that
happening
it
right
is
now
happening.
because
It will
we have
happen.
to have it happen. But if we had a shortfall again, it would happen because we don't have a
But
choice.
we
We need to pay our people.
Then what
But
does
also
she have
still
to
owe,
do?
it's still a debt.
What does she have to do? Call the hot person and say,
No, I think
sir,
we-
what am I supposed to do? I have to pay my
I
person.
think we asked HUD in this of what the appropriate procedure is.
Right.
And let that,
Well,
I think it's helpful. to
We've
have
asked them that question before.
that's okay, it's not, now it's coming from the board,
official.
and we're asking,
Okay,
because we're the ones that are incapable,
I gotcha.
so we need to explain to us.
Yeah.
I also think we need to understand what a violation of the Appropriations Act truly means. In terms of, is it like this, you get a bad review and a slap on the wrist, or is there actual liability tied to a violation? I mean, the Appropriations Act is a regulatory act, it's an actual law. So do we need to make sure there's nothing,
So are we going to jail?
and,
How liable is
What
the board?
or anybody? Or any of
well,
us.
I can tell you, I've never heard of anybody going to jail for paying for section 8 person like public housing.
So we should understand what that means.
I
What is a
understand.
Well,
violation?
even if they haven't done it, we need to know whether or not they can do it. especially as they try and understand. the
Yeah,
rules,
it's-
like,
things are getting weird.
As they
Yeah.
start to change the rules mid-game, I mean, they change the rules on
You're
the
right.
rule status.
So then the other part of that is the dreaded Switch Hills Place property.
We're divided.
It was right under that. The non.
Part B.
B.
Part B in that section.
And it's kind of the same scenario there. We pay the bills, Switch Hills Place reimburses us.
But evidently they don't.
But they have.
We don't pay all the bills. We pay, so like we have an account at, say, Menards. And the guys go out and buy materials. And at the end of the month, Mandy decides how much was for this and how much was for that. And then Patrick's our employee. And so when she runs payroll, it all gets run out of the same account. And then at the end of the month, she goes and she bills the Flint Hills Place development for that. It's kind of the same place we were a few years ago in this development. And I think this is something that bears more discussion, maybe not tonight, but at a future date about what do we really want to do with Flint Hills? Will we want to exercise our first right of refusal and take that property back? Do we want to give up the management of Flint Hills because it's kind of been a thorn in our side for several years? Or do we want to see if there's some kind of a agreement we can work out with MAP, whereas they can manage their tax credit units and we'll manage the public housing unit? Because honestly, one of the reasons we've not wanted to give them up is because it's a bit of a risk to us. They don't know public housing. They don't know how to calculate rents. They don't know all the ins and outs of public housing. And we receive the subsidy for them. And regardless of who's managing it, that subsidy has to flow through us. And we don't want to find ourselves in a place of liability or risk, I'll say, that some other, whether it be MAP or they hire another management company, mismanages or creates some type of liability when we're receiving the subsidy on their behalf. So I think that's
They
another.
aren't paying us, and they haven't been for a long time, or
Or
when was the last time?
I thought
It's supposed to come out of the rent we have, like,
it is,
but we have to pay enough rent.
yes. And our they haven't had enough to pay our management fee. And for 3 years,
This is the thing we went round and round about before.
yes.
But is it possible with the right of first refusal for us to take back whatever portion, say there's, I forget how many units there are exactly, but, okay, and how many of those are public housing? Can we just take half the buildings? Can we just take half the buildings and do the right of first refusal on
That's
part of
all
property?
one
That's one
property.
thing.
Okay, so we would have to buy them out if we exercise. our
What would
right.
happen is we probably would have to pay them $1, but we would have to take on the debt as well as taking on the ownership. We would have to refinance that debt, but we can't afford more debt.
Also, we don't want that property as an investment, I don't think, based on the problems it has maintenance wise, is that,
I've heard,
No,
said-
Gardens was the maintenance
was that?
property. We
I've
got rid
heard,
of
I've
that.
heard K-State wants the Flint Hills Place back.
There was a conversation, a very short one at one time, until I told them there was tax credits involved. And I think they decided not to fight that battle.
The tax credits expire also.
Yeah, but the compliance period is up in like 2 or 3 years, but they have to remain affordable for 15 years after that.
Why, and I know we went through this 3 years ago, and tonight might not be the time.
Yeah.
But why can't why does the subsidy have to be?
Why does what?
Why does the fund, the subsidy, what was it, the
Public housing.
Yeah.
Oh, the operating subsidy, because we're a housing authority and that is not.
So there's no way we can just say, we wash our hands of this, we don't want to, we don't like their management, we don't like that they're not paying us, we don't want to do this.
We can say we don't want to do this.
But then we lose that income, right, to lose the benefit.
But we still have to give them the stuff.
They go around the community that.
That's what I mean, like,
They
Why?
get their own subsidy. It wouldn't be taking away from our
No,
subsidy.
no. Why does it have to get filtered through us?
Because we're a housing, operating subsidy can only come through a public
So
housing
what if we
agency.
say we don't wanna do this anymore?
and
We're
they
gonna be
just don't get a
jerks,
subsidy.
and we'll
They
get
don't
rid of
get
the subsidy?
Yeah.
What happens then?
Don't think that's gonna lie very well because it's kind of in the covenants of how the development was.
Is that our problem?
They're not playing by the rules, why do we have to?
I don't know if that's even on the rules, is that our problem?
I think it is because it was kind of a partnership deal and I'm trying to think of the document that governs it, that had. I have to look at it.
We should look at it, I'm
We
not
can certainly ask the attorney.
totally different conversation, but sooner than later, because this, like you said, I know Phil used to have a lot of statements on this too, but.
The other thing we have to remember is they just did make a payment,
$7,500.
and they have agreed to pay up by,
No,
they haven't agreed to pay us. But they did make a payment.
Okay.
they don't make a payment. We handle
pay
all the
ourselves.
what.
But they owe us $60,000.
Yeah, that's nothing. $7,500 is nothing.
Here's what we could do. We could say, okay, we'll manage it. You do the accounting. Just make sure you send us our money every
No.
month.
You use your power.
And we clearly have demonstrated we have no recourse, like we have no way to demand that they pay us because we can't even.
I don't like the way they badmouth the housing authority in this community.
I don't
agree with
And
that.
I hear about it often enough. So who is this Midwest Housing Equity Group? They're not the math group.
No.
They're somebody else. They're the investors.
Yes, they're the
Do
syndicators.
you know who they are?
I don't know them well, no.
I imagine it's their employees going around bad mouthing because they're probably from afar.
I don't know who it is. But I just,
Well, I think it's one of their board members as well.
they can't let us cooperate, so they say.
What?
I have no idea.
That's a different discussion.
Yeah, I would like to know with what though.
But it's the same, I mean, that's, but that's.
I'm good to go. Yeah, that's also business relevant, so that's getting this result.
So this piece, I think like what Kennedy was saying is that we need to acknowledge that we have issues in this area that need to be handled and continuously reviewed. But I think we also need to acknowledge that these are conversations that are happening. The board is aware of this, it is being reported, and that the improper use of funding is something that we will continue to figure out a better solution to. I mean, we talked about that, but I think you need to address it. It's never been criticized, that it's something that is a standard use
I
criteria.
won't say it's never been criticized because we've talked about it in our monthly phone calls. And the auditor, he's never liked it, but he's never really written it up either. But I won't say it's never been mentioned because it has been discussed in our phone calls.
Well, what's the difference between the two?
Do you document the phone calls? I mean, it seems like the phone calls go into a dark hole and there's no documentation. It's only what's written that is documentable. So after you hang up from talking to HUD, you do a little paragraph about what they told you. That, as a result of this, isn't that important now? Seems to me.
Maybe now.
Maybe you should just take those phone calls.
And going forward, I would say that a section, a summary section, so that is part of our trouble status. a section in the board report saying what was discussed in the monthly phone call. Like you do. That way you're covering yourself, it's acknowledged in writing, we have that to reference back, and it gives us some ammo if they bring up something and say, well, you discussed this, but you weren't concerned about it, or
They'll be
whatever.
reading about themselves and what they said. So we don't know,
Yeah.
especially when it.
There actually is. When we send our financials to the financial person, Aaron, he plugs our numbers into the spreadsheet that kind of shows what our financial score would be. Remember when we talked in December on that phone call? When they said you've already made 11 of those points up? That's what he was looking at. And then he does a written summary of it. We got those.
But I'm talking
And the
about
Section 8 thing was mentioned in those.
when you call for direction on something or ask a question. I just think it's good practice. Or put it in writing back to them. Thank you for visiting with me this afternoon. I am so pleased to learn that your interpretation of something is something, and that's a big help. Thank you. You know, you have a record.
Email.
You have a record.
Yeah.
I don't know, I'm just.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no, or I send a follow-up question or.
But this stuff is serious business. My concern is that we need to protect ourselves, yourself.
So serious, they should have sent somebody, they should have been on top of this a long time. This is that alarming. Why are they just doing this on writing? Somebody, an authority should have been here and asked some questions, because this is totally inaccurate and false. And so the incompetence is not here, the incompetence is above us.
That was exactly when I read this letter, I said, I've sat in on plenty of good exams that go down, and not once, but you know you're gonna get a bad review before the letter's sent. You know exactly what's gonna be criticized, and I have always on this board been under the impression that that's how it works here too. Like even in 2018, we weren't surprised. It wasn't good, we weren't happy, but we weren't surprised, and we immediately attacked that with, okay, this is what we need to do. Now we're at the bottom, we need to work on it. And everything that you've been indicating to us has indicated, I mean, I think throughout the last year, almost every time the review has been mentioned, you kind of updated us. And I know I've asked a couple of times, are we progressing? Are we progressing in the positive? Are we seeing positive input in terms of our rating? Is our rating going to improve? And always you were able to give me a pretty positive indication that we're moving in a good direction, which to your point, is why this was so blindsiding. Because, and it sounds like those monthly discussions, you said these bullet points, that's something we need to include in there. Like that's something we need to say, per our monthly discussions, we were meeting these benchmarks that were set, which are part of this process. That's why we have those monthly discussions, to assess, are we meeting the benchmarks that have been set for us? And we were meeting those benchmarks. So why all of a sudden is that all thrown out the window and they're doing a new review process that we weren't made aware of, and we get a review without notice? And that's a big thing we need to say. We weren't notified of these issues and everything else.
Except for the Section 8 issue, we were.
And that's, I mean, in any review, it's probably not gonna be a slam dunk, especially if we were starting from trouble. I mean, there are gonna be things that we just have to own up to and say, yeah.
Exactly, and that was what I told Jane when we talked, is, you know, there's about 2 things in here that are true, and they're not good things, but I'm not gonna deny them.
Right.
Do we want to send somebody out there and people this? They may be a virtual only for now.
Yeah, they're not gonna send anybody
I-
out there.
I think once we make an actual response, we will demand.
Okay, in our response, we will, okay.
Because
I think it's
they don't
warranted.
get away with themselves.
Yeah.
Without us getting a face to face.
In case you can't tell, I'm a little angry.
Trying really hard to be.
So Jenny.
I think somebody else needs to lead the show for a little bit.
That's why I'm letting you speak. I'm sitting here. Because you're,
We went over the third bullet point, right? The review of the board minutes, like we talked about that already. All right, so financial, this whole did not understand the cost and time associated with the department hours and CS, but, it's one of those, you can't know what's involved in the project until you start the executions. And we did have a plan to lease newly renovated.
So,
not only did we have a plan, but we have a series of actions that we can point to that we actually did.
the head engineers were the ones who cut all those costs down to a bare minimum. The head engineers did that.
So we
And-
need to document that. I mean, that's
But
the stuff.
if we didn't have a plan, and then we needed to just insert them into our plan
Exactly.
and show the.
We certainly did. We knew what the costs were because we paid an engineer $20,000 to come in and do our estimates for us before we ever applied for the grant. Had second guessed the engineer. So Hank did not know. Sorry.
No,
Can
you're
we
right.
have,
You're
I mean, there's documentation throughout the whole process that counters this assertion, like,
To me, that's an easy document.
yeah, right, there's no kind of
They might not
documentation.
accept it, but
We were making decisions throughout the process as to the cost and time constraints of the project and doing the best we could, essentially.
I think we wanted us to recycle the toilet.
that had more expensive or something away.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, if it looks that way, addressing the fact that expenses increase. For example, we couldn't get our certificate of occupancy until we spent $250,000 on sewage. I mean, those are the things that you don't plan, but we covered and we fixed, and now we're able to lease.
Well, we were at a standstill for a few months while we discussed and worked through getting, approaching the city for the money and getting the agreement signed.
7 months.
Which they encouraged us to do, and which after we did get it, they told Joanne what a great thing that was.
And we need to have documentation of that too.
And it also says that it starts in 2021, but it doesn't say it's 20 years,
It's 30 years.
30 years. It's like, we just have to pay $1 million back, there's no timeline. So when we respond, we need to say, this is the debt over 30 years.
And here's the amortization schedule.
We also need to track that vehicle tax, what is it, the city tax that it's not a levy, but it's payable.
It's way below.
Yeah. We need to bring up that offset, if we elect to request a waiver, that offsets our debt service, and that was a major piece of the discussion, was that offset if needed from our pocket. So if in 2021 we're not solvent and we can't make that, then we would just say, we'd like to, in lieu of this payment, have to support our debt in the city, you pay what you want us to pay.
But at the rate we're going, we won't be able to make anything.
Well,
I'm not sure.
I tell you what, we look 100 times better now than we did in 2018.
Now, as part of our support, should we include our documentation on our agreement with the city for the 30 years instead of just saying, oh, we're just including 30 years?
Don't they have it already?
They do, but I'll say.
But it's probably in their email or something.
Because what it also does is it gives a summary, the prior point, it gives a summary of the reward, like that report summarizes the decision and the steps it took to get to that point. So like both the city report, the city minutes and our minutes, all correspond and really show that it was an educated decision. It wasn't just a, oh, let's go out and get that.
And on top of that, like regulatory.
Right, yeah, absolutely, and highlight it.
I don't know if we're allowed to ask them for what ask them what documentation they looked at, but they keep bringing up the minutes, but they don't say which minutes they looked at. And they can't have looked at all of them,
There's no way.
because
So, yeah, ask me specifically which minutes were not reviewed. Because it seems like
It seems, based on our review, it seems
based on, I mean,
that
we
this
have,
entity
and we can make it a
lacks the
quantifiable thing, like we
responsibility
have
of politics.
minutes for this many years, this many months, including this many sessions.
Or
And
could we point to the specific minutes where these things are discussed?
So,
both,
We could say, see, date, so-and-so, when this discussion was held.
in case you missed it in your review.
we do wanna make sure that our reply reads administratively, not. I know. we're-
I
Yeah.
understand. Respect.
I gotta listen
You gotta
to
get it
it.
out, but we want to watch out.
I tried my hardest in my response.
Yours, this is great. You did a lot of work in a short time, and this is exactly, last week when I was calling you, this is exactly what I was going to ask questions. So you, this is great.
Yes.
So the second bullet point, this is our poor financial decisions have resulted, so maybe it should be, our financial decisions have resulted in a significant amount of debt. One could say HUD's poor financial support.
Advice.
And advice.
Guidance.
Guidance, yeah, because we took their advice all along the way.
I think it
Congress.
should be after consulting with HUD.
Yeah.
and Receiving
Yeah.
projections for additional funding from HUD, we made the financial decisions to take on that additional debt. Like after we talked to you, after we consulted.
After exhausting all other options.
Well, the HUD
With
consultant specifically recommended that you.
No, HUD themselves recommended, we talked to that consultant.
Exactly. So that's where.
So this entire bullet point kind of just falls apart because all this debt was incurred, they were with intense checking in and research and advice seeking and all of that.
And
So,
not only did, I'm sorry,
no,
then
yeah,
not only did HUD recommend it, HUD headquarters, Office of Capital Improvements recommended it. I'll have to go back and find, I think I remember the name of that person, but I'll have to go back and look for sure.
Keep it up. And that's the step we need to really focus on, is saying, on this date, this HUD official recommended this, on this date, this HUD official approved this, on this date, this HUD official congratulated us for doing this, for following through with what they had already recommended. Like, those are the things we need to say, because that demonstrates, one, that we were attentive, that we were progressing with advice, and that we were acting on the advice that they were providing. So it's very difficult for them to criticize us if we're demonstrating that that's the pattern. And if in the end of this whole ridiculous game, we end up having to file a lawsuit against HUD, we want to make sure we have that documented. So think about that, like think about not just this response, but how it looks for a third set of eyes between us and the mediator has to come in and say, well, they did provide all this, and you did authorize this, what else were they supposed to do?
Does the housing authority ever sue HUD?
No, there was a group of housing authorities that sued HUD, I think it was around 2013. When HUD said you can only have X number of months of expenditures in your reserve account. And if you have more than that, we're gonna recapture it. And so, of course, the word was, get your reserves spent down or HUD's gonna take it back. So we didn't lose any. But a lot of housing authorities did.
The ones that did got together.
They did, they filed a class action suit against HUD and they won. They got their money back. I don't know if they got it yet.
It would never be the ideal to you,
No, it would not.
but if,
Trust a lot.
if this was to be a continued approach to the certified without quantitative data and sending it directly to city officials via your agency without any correspondence in the middle, then that's a tight line they're walking there. That, again, I come down to notice, like, not giving us proper notice during here. If this was one of our tenants, I mean, talk about the issues that we facing, and you said, you haven't really been doing what we told you to do. And then didn't give them a chance to go through it, yeah, it's the same thing, just a bigger animal.
Yeah, I was particularly upset that when Yusha, she saw it or we saw it because we owe the city $1 million. So what position does it put Yusha in? She receives this information.
Well, Yusha is sort of on our side, even though she might not directly be, because we are all appointed by the mayor. So there is a city appointment process in the board positioning on this that makes them also accountable in a different way.
Right, and I'm not suggesting that Yusha Reddy is gonna jump up and down. I'm just saying, if it was with Butler,
That's where, because
or if it was a different
it will be
commissioner who will be there next
January
year.
6th.
I think that could have caused us a lot of political problems.
You just said it to me and said, "Can you tell me what's going on?"
There's a certain degree of
You're just
confidentiality.
gonna say what's going on and what are you, what are you
You
doing?
should have been emailed. Did you get it in your email?
I got it from you.
They have you as being copied.
You didn't get that letter? You didn't get that letter?
You know, the city mail stacks things on top of each other, so it's the same letter, it's received, I could have,
I'll see who
you've seen it from you. I know I'm on the letter.
You're on the letter, so you received it.
Well, that's what
And everybody else in the room?
I didn't know.
You did not receive it?
I got this copy.
So this is the first time seeing it.
I didn't get a copy.
I'll go look.
Well, you're on the list.
Here, I'm looking it up right now.
Popped
Yeah.
up to me from you.
It went to
Oh my
Ida,
gosh,
it
sent
went
it
to Morse at City of NHK.
So Yusha's email piled in on top, before I ever read it, Yusha's email came,
Okay.
and Yusha's was on top of it, that's what I read, so I didn't think it.
No, I don't think you're on it.
Well, that's another problem.
No, she is, well, according to the letter.
She's looking
Well,
at the
on-
email.
But the
You
actual
showed
email
me-
address.
Bill Kennedy, Ida.
Bill's the only one that wasn't on the email, from what I can tell. It was Ida, Linda.
Then I apologize, folks, I should have sent it to you.
Well, you wouldn't have known that unless you looked for each
I just assumed that everybody that they said they copied the letter, they didn't receive it.
Well, I mean, because that's
Bill,
what's supposed to
you have
happen.
your email address.
You gave them
Your
the-
address, but your email address.
But I was.
Well, yeah, you sent it to the city, but Delta sent it to all board members.
Well, I thought I did check because I immediately saw the cheating.
Are you talking about from
Not
Jan?
you,
I'm talking about.
not
I'm talking about the letter, this letter from HUD.
You probably wouldn't have been looking for Bill.
Yeah, and there were a lot of extra people on it too. So
Right.
there's all the.
Yeah, and I saw this Patty Person and Larry Maxwell and Ron Snyder and Adam Austin and everybody on the board, so.
So of this list, I think Bill's the only one that I saw that wasn't included on it. And so I don't know if they didn't have their email address or if they just forgot or like whatever.
In which case, that's inappropriate as well.
Yeah.
Well, they knew he was a board member because they have him on the letter, so if they didn't have his email address, they should have been calling me and saying, why haven't you updated your board members in the online system?
It's okay. I think we don't necessarily need, we won't get much benefit from having that to their attention, but Bill has some deniability.
I don't know what you're talking
Yeah, I wish I was so.
There
Did
go.
you get my comment, my letter that I sent out that I was in the?
That's why I responded.
I guess I should have sent this letter, I should have included this letter in this response.
Okay, so it looks like, we can go through the rest of this line by line, but it looks like what we're saying to Joanne is to take the information she's given us and to apply it to a timeline. And as she does that, and and comes across anything else that should be applied to the timeline, she should go ahead and add those things in. And that's our long response, which we can all look at, and then we can decide how to write a summary. Is that where we're at? I feel like, I mean, we can keep going through this and so people can ask questions, but
Yes,
that's a big ask. I mean, that's,
Could take a little
as,
bit.
it's gonna be as intense as what she's done already.
What do we wanna do first on our? So I'm with regional. I mean, I would say this needs to be done tomorrow, but I have no.
That's absolutely
No,
not
I know.
possible.
I know that, that's why I want you to let us know what's reasonable so we can figure out what to expect. So we can have a reasonable expectation and then determine if we do need to do something before.
Well, we are definitely gonna send that response letter. And that's gonna happen. Joanne's gonna write it tomorrow, send it to all of us to approve, and then we're gonna send that either tomorrow or the next day.
Maybe it should go out on Monday. 'Cause that's not what we-
Yeah. Well, Friday, we should send that we're working on this response.
Well, if we send it on Friday, those are more likely to be ignored. On Monday, everybody's going to.
Or I just don't think we wanna wait a long time. I think I want them to know right away that we're working.
So they say in here, as soon as can be arranged, HUD will arrange a meeting with Manhattan Housing Authority to negotiate an execute a recovery agreement. But we're not gonna wait for that, obviously. But I do think we should acknowledge that in this and say, we understand that you will be arranging a meeting with us, but we do want to respond before that meeting in regard to these items. Right? So that meeting can be more productive in terms of coming up with a plan. I mean, we all know we have a plan
Well,
going
yeah,
forward.
and I think the sooner the better. That I can get the timeline together and the board can get their response.
So we have a regularly scheduled meeting next Wednesday.
Oh, Lord.
So it'll be done better.
Well,
I'm
I
kidding.
hate to do that to you,
I'll have a good start.
but I really think, again, Andy and you need to sit down together and Patrick can help, if there's anything Kat can help. If anything, I want this to be a team. So I want, the staff is a team and we're a team and together we're a team.
Well, but hold
So I want everybody to
some of
be
the
on.
staff wasn't even here when all this was.
Well, that's true, that's
What
true.
is our staff awareness of this?
Yeah.
Like, where's our staff?
We
Do
had
know
an
about this
all
letter?
hands staff meeting yesterday. We met for 3 hours.
Good.
And went through and discussed. I had them all read this letter. And then I gave them this. And we went through and discussed it and we talked about places we could do better and things that we need to do going forward and, a few things. And re-emphasized again that we need to do things like fill our vacancies in the order that they became vacant, not what's the quickest unit to turn around and the easiest. And there are policies we need to update. We do have a maintenance policy. It probably does need to be updated to include more detailed inspection procedures like pre-react inspections and annual inspections. They're mentioned, but they're really kind of just there. So we talked about those things. We talked about some of the hurdles that we have. We talked about the need to have another maintenance worker. We talked about a lot of stuff. And we went over again how our score is computed and how many points the physical is 40 points, the financial is 25 points, the management is 10 points. And the vacancies affect the management and the capital fund. And the capital fund is 10 points. And we went through all of that. So, and we went back through for the newer staff that weren't here, how we got to this point. And so it was about 3 hours.
I mean, we have to be transparent with it and without. And I really think it's important because, I mean, our staff are all on the line. I mean, the buck stops with her, but everybody is on the line. So, do we want to keep talking about these points, or do we want to give her that assignment and
I've covered all my questions, I mean, not all, but the material.
I think you get an idea of the things that we're interested in making sure get included and that we, and to really start documenting all this.
And I think the timeline
I
would
do
do
too.
that. I didn't think of that when I said, I want you to go line by line. And I want an appendix for
First,
everything we
email
covered.
to me and Ron Fear and Katie Jackson said, I'm not exactly sure what to do with this letter. Linda, I don't know if you can give me more information, but if you can, that would be great. Thanks. So I got it, probably just right, because she would have been copied when you were sent the email. And so just,
Who was that?
who was what?
Oh,
You
Yusha.
sent her that.
Yeah, Yusha was on the original.
Yeah, but she sent it to me. I hadn't seen it, and
And
you,
Ron,
I saw it from
Katie.
Yusha. And Yusha sent it to Ron Fear, Katie Jackson, and me, asking, and I need to respond to her in some way also, so.
Well,
Now that we've talked about
I would
this,
actually suggest
I'm better able to do
that you
that.
tell her about this meeting.
Exactly.
I'm not sure I want you to send her that big document.
I'm not, no, I just, I'll.
but I
tell her.
You
really
should
think-
got that big document.
Yusha got this big document, okay? But I really think, it would be best to say, Joanne wants to talk to you about it. And then Joanne can say, this is her assignment, is that she's gonna be working on this timeline.
I don't
Actually,
think we
reporting
have
back
to have Joanne call Yusha. I think I'll just tell Yusha that we had a meeting, a long meeting this evening, and we have another meeting next week. And we're preparing a response to HUD and to, because there were some accusations in there that just aren't true. And that we're gonna, so I think I can just do that without.
That's fine.
I don't need to cost you any more time if I can handle it.
That's fine. I invited Lucia to the meeting and I included her on
Sure.
the sending out the board
But
package.
she's not gonna read it.
Because I thought it was, since she was addressed in the letter, I thought it was important that she be included.
Well, when I was mayor, I got some kind of a notice from HUD also. So they always target the mayor, because in most communities, the housing authority is under the city leadership. Here, it's a de facto thing, you make the appointments and
But
that's
we're
it.
appointed by the mayor.
Yeah,
I
And that's
agree.
the thing. is
There
that-
are
Yeah.
ties, and this agency gets its health insurance, so there are other ties involved here too.
Well, we get it, but we pay for it.
Yeah, sure, but you get a good rate because you're one of.
Yeah,
that
we
group.
do, yeah.
So,
I paid
so I
it.
think if you say that to her and she even thumbs through, she can see where we're
I
going.
think we're good.
I think we
And
should
that-
take it a step further, and this is just my personal thoughts, but because she was included on this, because she's the mayor, it's not like she's just some random third party. I think that maybe Dan and Linda should do an email that CCs and it just summarizes, just say, as you received, we had our meeting, sorry you weren't able to be there, but we want to let you know that if you have any questions, we'd like to address them. Also, we will be following up on this discussion again next Wednesday and then continuously having meetings as necessary until
You want me to send that?
it's resolved. And, well, you're the chair, but it should come probably from one of our board members. And it could be Linda, but I also think that because it just depends, I mean, it could be either, but I think it should probably at least have you CC'd on it.
I think
Okay.
the letter
Chair
was
and-
so harsh, and that she was just emailing, because she used to be on this board, surely.
How many years?
She has a clue.
I don't think it should just be a conversation, I think it should be
No, I'm
documented
talking about, yeah.
and acknowledge that.
Okay, I'll send her an email tonight when I come home.
Or Linda can, I mean, I don't want to put that on you, I just think either.
Linda is the city commission liaison, you can send it and copy the rest of the board.
Whichever,
Yeah,
which one
I'll
do
be
that?
glad.
That's fine.
Just in writing, it's not just a casual conversation between, because.
No, I'm not, I was gonna send you that.
You know, in this case, with this person, she knows us. And she sat on this board and she knows how this board operates. And that can only help.
I mean, unless,
Except that we have $1 million and this puts in the light that, you know, we're bad people, so.
Anyway, I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, Linda's gonna take care of it. I'm good. So do we need to talk more? Or do we wanna dump this huge obnoxious
So we'll see
assignment
it
on
on the
her?
draft in preparation for next Wednesday night. So we're having that.
I'll get as far as I can, I promise.
Well, maybe not such a full draft, at least, at the very least, can you provide us with at least the bullet point outline?
Yeah.
And then we can fill that in, so that it's at least clean enough that we can discuss without being overwhelmed without, all the details. And maybe that's not as tasking as trying to debate each issue.
Yeah, I mean, and I can keep working on a more detailed timeline, but
Sure.
it might be kind of to that point, like if you focus on a section of it so that you can see the tone and the format, and that way we can give you feedback on if that's the direction that seems, like if we can read it and say, yes, this is the tone and format that really seems to,
for a response.
for the response and
For the timeline.
and the response to each of these items, like however you're responding to them so that we can see the tone and format. Basically the edits, kind of editing this to make it into the tone and format that you feel would be good, but instead of having the whole thing done, having a section of so we can review it and say, yeah, that's exactly what we were looking for, or it doesn't quite, we need a little bit, we need it to go a little different.
Plus the timeline.
And that, if the timeline is the way you're gonna respond, then do that.
No, I think the timeline was just kind of to clarify for you guys.
No, I think the timeline is a good way to respond. You know, you can say, because that's data.
So the timeline for us is more like an outline, so that we can kind of track what's happening, where it's happening. And then you can fill, it's kind of like an outline when writing a paper, you create the outline and then you fill in the spaces. So we just basically need to have an idea of the outline by next week. And then we can fill in, you know, if it takes more time to fill in the spaces, that's fine. But when we respond, we should still respond in a summary that's much like a timeline, so that when they look at it, we give about 2 minutes, we're not gonna give more than that. So they need to be able to look at it, see our primary points without getting into all the words.
And then we may
That's
to
what
have
we did
another
for us.
special meeting.
Yes.
I don't know that a timeline addresses their.
Joanne,
bullet
maybe
points.
that's a 2-minute brief.
What, I think our
No, but you
timeline,
fill in the
we need
points.
like a chronological
Yeah.
description of like the steps and the events that happened. So like we started this discussion by saying, okay, in 2018, we had the assessment, and then we were given this documentation dated blah, 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 that provided the troubled status. And per that document, we met these timelined items in adherence to what was told to us to do. So we checked these off, we were meeting the benchmarks, we got to this point. Because what we want to do is we want to paint a picture that we were working towards exactly what they were telling us to every step of the way. And that all of a sudden, at the end of the game, they changed it on us. And so that chronological description of how we were responding to their requests all the way down, and then filling in the gaps would be that we say, also in between this period of time, this external factor occurred. So this item occurred during this time, which influenced our ability to meet this goal. Like, then we'll fill in those details.
So the timeline you want me to start with is from the time we were notified that we were troubled for 2018.
I think it should include some of the EAPC, if my actions are
Right.
way off.
So-
The energy.
Performance contract.
Yeah.
It's gonna have to include that, and it's gonna have to include as much detail about the building as possible.
Well, I think some of the important things will be, you know, we discovered the mold on this date. We applied for the emergency grant on this date. We had the engineer came in and gave us his cost
Yes.
estimates on this date. And,
We all agree with that.
yeah.
Throw it in there, absolutely.
And I'd rather put too much in and have you say, take it out, than to not
Yes,
give you
I
that.
think it's gonna help me put things in context.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're gonna send off the thing that says, we got your letter and we're working on it.
yeah.
And you're gonna tell Yusha that, and you're gonna work on this timeline, beginning the framework of the document that will be our response. We will discuss it at our regular meeting, which is next Wednesday, right? Okay, and then we may have to have a special meeting again after that, and I don't know if we wanna think about what that is, or we can just discuss it next.
Is there anything else on the agenda for next week that's significant?
Regular stuff.
I think Veronica grants just came out, so, I mean, that's routine stuff. And the RAD update, which, that is being update of our call that you were on.
Whatever. I mean, like you didn't find out much.
No,
Can you send us a copy of the RFP?
Yeah.
So that we have, because that's, to me, at least at the city, you have a discussion, you agree to something, and then you do an RFP. This is an RFP before we've ever made a decision.
but
HUD
it
is pushing this hard,
was,
is what's happening.
it was in the capital fund budget that was approved.
I know. But we don't even know what we asked for in the RFP, what the statement or the scope of the project is. So that's why I want a copy of it.
I don't think it was.
She can include that with the minutes. With the packet.
Well, I won't make it part of the packet, and I'll send it separately.
Okay. Okay,
I wonder if maybe once we. I wonder if it would be helpful if we were doing the packet, rather than sending it by topic, we could almost send it by year. So like, here's a packet for 2018, here's a packet just in 2019, here's a packet just in 2020. So that there isn't any confusion. Because first of all, this is supposed to be from 2018. And it's all the way to 2020, so we are gonna have to acknowledge that. And then they can read what they need to read for their evaluation, 2018. This is this.
you know, when they talked about rent collection and evictions, stuff, it was like, we weren't allowed to do that for 6 months. What are you talking about?
In 2020.
In 20.
But that's part of the timeline, and part of the timeline is HUD delaying answers. We asked the state, they got back to us, whenever they got back to us.
And if I see Libby is highlighting and reading again, if you have come up with specific questions while she's working on her document, just send her the question.
Or like, we kind of address in our things that are positive. I mean, when we talk about the marketing stuff, I think that reflects really positive on our board and our management and our marketing plan all tied together. So some of those things that we as board members think of that are important in our discussion during our thought process might be relevant to bring up the things that's important, and this is what we did, this is what I remember us doing. And if it's wrong, then we'll know that.
No,
It might be that our next meeting we could brainstorm on marketing too, and additions to the marketing plan, so that to show that we're continuing to work on it. And that it wasn't something left in history, and that it, because it's a major part of this is our filling up these units.
A major part of it is the pressure that Manhattan is going through. It's not a question of marketing, it's a question of the economy in Manhattan as flooded. That's the reality.
are you able
And it's
to
not an excuse.
put
It's
this on
fancy.
that?
But that should mean that there's more people who would be eligible for public housing.
There should be a higher demand for low income housing.
That's true. And how long does it take to get one person into
Yeah.
a room?
And then
By House rule.
That's right.
I can do it in 24 hours, and it takes you more like 24 days because of all the rules and regulations.
That's making that clinic go from, clinic go back and forth 10 times to resubmitting.
Well, we
Most people
lose
that
the-
position don't
We
How they
lose
go
them
with
as a tenant because they have to go somewhere. By the time we get through the paperwork, they've already had to have a place and sign stuff. So we gotta get a room over there.
Okay, I'm exhausted. Thank you, Jamie, for handling my rage. And, no, I really
It's fine.
appreciate, it. I really appreciate you doing that because you're very analytical and it's very helpful for us.
Well, I think very highly of this board and our management. I know that this is something that happens in our circumstances. The storm that led to this moment has been building for 5 years. And so it's not, this last twisted the end because everything had been gearing towards, even with the low vacancy, everything that we've been receiving has been gearing towards at least positive, not good, but positive improvement, finding steps for improvement.
Something I've been wondering is if the national administration's direction has been at play here in pushing this to the point that it is now, and what they're doing, because this does not seem like the natural order of the events that we should expect.
I will say to some degree, both the financial analyst and the portfolio manager seemed rather frustrated. I'm not sure this all happened in the Kansas City office. I think it came down from higher. And I feel like I'm still kind of, I guess I need to ask more questions because I feel like I'm still kind of in the dark. When did this change? Who did the review? What were they reviewing?
And who were the 30 people that read this?
And who are the 30 people that this letter went through? I want to know who all had to approve this dang letter because I'm going to guess that 25 of them didn't know anything about Manhattan Housing Authority.
Those are absolutely questions that we need to be asking. And we also need to keep in mind that this might be political. It might be something that we will never win. We might never win this. But we have to document it and we have to defend because at the end of the day, even if we stay in the same status and everything, we have to at least show that this is not accurate, that it was a political policy change, not an ineptitude.
Yeah.
And that's what we're fighting for.
The positive I'm seeing here is that their summary, basically you all have to do this to fix it, because all of this revisionist history that they threw on here, we can't fix what's in the past. We can document the hell out of it and say, this is inaccurate, but all of the things they're telling us we have to do to fix it, basically Joanne's like, well, we're already doing that. And our biggest, we have many big hurdles, but there are plans for all of it already, and then that maintenance worker thing is just an ongoing issue that.
I'm going to tell you, it's not for the lack of trying.
Yeah, exactly. So we're already doing everything that they told us we have to do. So most of the energy is going into basically saying, your version of history is not accurate. So while this is shocking and infuriating, I'm not so worried about the direction, you know?
Joanne, do you know this Frances Sinclair?
Oh, yes.
You've met her?
Huh?
You've met her,
Oh, yes,
and she knows your work?
yes.
And how could she has not signed this other document.
Yeah,
She only signed the first 2 pages, so who the hell wrote it?
I don't know.
I'd call Francis, you know.
That is it. Well, I will talk with Brent sooner or later. That's a digital signature. And I happen to know that she wasn't in the office when this letter went out because I asked Patty Bennett, why was I not copied on this letter? And her response was, well, Frank wasn't in the office, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to send it to you, you know, I'm trying to be in the decision, and I'm like, well, do you have email?
That was just.
I mean, that should have been Francis's decision to send this out, not somebody else.
Wasn't there?
I would call her and find out if he even knows about it.
That kind of stuff, that insignificant statement right there to me is like incredibly telling and incredibly problematic. If we ever, like I said, think about it, if you were presenting this picture, not fighting against them, but describing this to a mediator somewhere else, and think about how you want to paint our side being amicable, meeting our objectives, meeting our goals, doing everything they ask every step of the way, and then having their wishy-washiness, their uncertainty, and all of that is what we're getting back at. And that's, we want to present that picture, and that's what our timeline, that's what all this is to make sure we're putting together.
I will say that Fran fought very hard for us when we applied for the emergency fund grant. They were gonna give us $2 million.
Oh my God.
That would've been nice.
Or something less.
We would have read it just for the building.
But Fran did go to bat and fight with headquarters to get us the 5.4 that we got, so.
So she knows the story.
Oh, yes, Fran was here for the open house. And Patty Gale.
So maybe.
Are you allowed to record your phone calls?
Yeah, this is a one-party.
Yeah, that might be the way to go.
You need to start recording all the time. Those monthly ones and.
My phone's getting full of recorded.
Well, then you'll have to download them.
So you still have a phone call for this, you have a phone call coming up for September
For
Your monthly.
or
oh,
monthly phone call.
there's not always a phone call, sometimes it's an email.
Okay.
The phone call is usually there's a question about why did our score go down a couple points, or,
Something that has to be explained,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, an email is good because it's in writing and you can see it.
But those phone calls are valuable also, and they aren't documented.
Okay, kids, I'm gonna say.
So shall
Well, I'm
we,
not leaving on September 30th, by the way.
Yeah, thank you.
should we expect a long meeting on next Wednesday also?
Yeah.
Maybe not this long, but longer than.
However long it takes, I just, we tried to be succinct by doing, voting on the whole packet, start at one time, and then going back and asking questions, and so. I don't believe in long meetings, but, this conversation, and will have to be had 2 or 3 more times probably before, we're done with our,
I'll say, I guess, I don't believe I'm gonna say this, but, let's say that sometimes bad things happen in housing authorities. And there have been some cases of bad stuff happening, and the board was just la-ti-da, not involved in the very least. And, I guess HUD to a degree feels like, I guess they need to cover their butts, or,
this whole thing is a CYA, I'm sorry.
but I assure you it's not here.
It's not that we even thought that for a moment, so I don't think you have to constantly defend yourself about that.
I don't feel like I have to defend myself to you all, but I feel like if a member of the public or another agency had no idea what was going on, that letter is very damning.
Absolutely.
I feel like we're all on that one though.
Right, it's all of us.
It made me sit up straight, like, wait a minute. I'm gonna start asking all those little nitty questions that I.
And it does state, we brought this up earlier, is you put together a very thorough board packet. And a lot of it has been response over the years of what you want to see or what various boards wanted to see. And so you've responded to them in a thorough way, so we don't have to ask the nitty-gritty questions, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I have this question, and I'm like, oh, good thing I didn't ask that, it's right there in front of me. Like, I don't wanna ask questions that are right there in front of me, and they're there. I mean, what it comes down to is, we don't have occupancy. We've had a lot of years of bad luck, and we don't have occupancy, and how many times can we ask that?
Yeah, and it's not just this building, I mean, we've had vacancies, and we've had some long-term vacancies. We had a couple of units at Carlson that had plumbing issues. And they've been vacant for 3 years. But, you know, we've gotten them fixed. Did we have money to fix stuff? No. But we also didn't have a waiting list to put people in them. So, you know, let's get somebody built up, fix those units.
So is there a category for needs mechanical fixing versus just for vacancy because we don't have anybody to put in?
I should have taken them offline.
Okay,
I really didn't foresee it taking that long to get it fixed.
yeah.
In hindsight,
Well, and if we don't have the money to fix it, then.
our facility supervisor was also a little slow about finding somebody to fix it. I'll say that, but
But we have
You
a
know,
really good one now.
I'm not gonna lay blame, so, I mean, the buck stops here, so.
Are we adjourned?
The fly count is on this.
Yeah. This is very productive.
And I would like to submit